I thought paying for that family vacation would bring us closer. Instead, it showed me just how far apart we'd already become. I remember that morning like a bad dream you can't quite shake off. The sun was bright, the coffee smelled strong, and my heart was lighter than it had been in years. My son, Daniel, had finally called the night before, saying he wanted to take me on a family vacation. "Dad," he said, his voice warm for once, "you've done so much for us. It's time you relax for a change. Let me plan something for all of us. Me, Clara, the kids, and you." That simple sentence was enough to make my old heart skip. We hadn't traveled together in more than a decade, not since my wife, Eleanor, passed away. After she was gone, Daniel grew distant, always busy, always promising to call back tomorrow. Tomorrow stretched into years. But that night, his tone was different. It sounded like forgiveness, or maybe like he finally missed me. I couldn't sleep from excitement. I spent the night rummaging through old drawers, pulling out my camera, my worn passport, the hat Eleanor used to say made me look like a movie cowboy. I imagined us sitting on a beach, maybe laughing over drinks, reconnecting like we used to before life hardened both of us. The next day, I drove 2 hours to Daniel's house to help plan the trip. Clara greeted me at the door, her usual fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, you're here," she said flatly, not even inviting me in at first. She looked at my shoes, the way I clutched a folder with my savings. "Daniel's on a call. You can wait." I waited and waited. I could hear laughter coming from his office, not the warm kind, but that casual, relaxed laugh he never used with me. When he finally came out, he looked surprised. "Dad, what are you doing here already?" "I thought we could plan the vacation together," I said, forcing a smile. "I brought my savings. I want to help. Maybe even pay for everyone." He hesitated. I saw Clara's eyes light up for a moment, like she smelled opportunity. "Oh, that's generous," she said, slipping closer to him. "That could really help with the resort booking. Things have been tight." I didn't mind. I wasn't doing it for thanks. I just wanted to belong again. So I paid. Plane tickets, resort fees, meals, everything went through my card. It felt good, in a foolish way, to be useful. When I handed Daniel the confirmation emails, I said, "I'm just happy to finally go somewhere with my family again." He smiled, hugged me, awkwardly, and said, "Of course, Dad. It'll be special." I left that day floating. For the first time in years, I felt like part of something again. I even went to the mall and bought new sandals, a pair of linen shorts, and a Hawaiian shirt I thought my grandson would find funny. The cashier had to stifle a laugh when I asked if it looked vacation enough. 3 days later, I started packing. Daniel hadn't texted yet, but I assumed he was busy. I told my neighbor, Bill, that I'd be gone for a week. "Finally treating yourself? Huh, Robert," he said. I nodded. "Family trip," I answered proudly. But the night before the supposed departure, my phone was silent. No call, no pickup time, no address. I tried messaging Daniel. Nothing. Finally, I called. It rang once, then went to voicemail. The next morning, I woke early and checked my email. No tickets in my name. Maybe there was a mix-up? I told myself that until noon. Then I opened Facebook. There they were. Daniel, Clara, the 2 kids, standing on a beach, all smiles, holding tropical drinks. The caption read, "Finally some real family time. Palm tree sparkles. No mention of me. No tag. No seat left for the man who paid for it all." My hands shook. I didn't want to believe it. I refreshed the page, hoping it was an old photo, a joke, anything but the truth. But the timestamp mocked me, posted 1 hour ago. And as I stared at those pictures, I realized something I never thought I would. My son had used me. Not just for money, for convenience, for silence, for what I represented. I sat at my kitchen table, the suitcase still open beside me. My shirt pressed, sandals polished. The coffee turned cold as I whispered to no one. Maybe they forgot me. But deep down, I knew they hadn't. They'd chosen to. And that was the day something inside me shifted. Quietly, slowly, like an old door closing forever. For the rest of that day, I sat by the window, staring at the street that never changed. The neighbor's dog barked. A kid on a bike passed by, laughing. Life went on as usual, except mine had cracked somewhere deep inside. I replayed every moment of our last conversation in my head. His tone, the way he said "we," the fake sincerity. It all sounded so convincing then. I wanted to believe in him so badly that I ignored every sign. Clara's coldness, his vague plans, the missing details. I should have seen it coming. By evening, the photos multiplied. Videos now. Daniel tossing his son into the pool, Clara sipping champagne, the caption reading, "Grateful for family moments like these." Family. The word hit like a knife. I called again, straight to voicemail. Then again. Same thing. I wrote a message. "Daniel, did something happen? I thought I was coming too." It stayed unread. Hours turned into night. Night into a sleepless fog. The next morning, I checked my phone before my eyes were even open. Still nothing. But the pictures kept coming. Meals, sunsets, boat rides. And in every one of them, the same smile. That proud, effortless smile of someone who thinks they'll never have to answer for what they've done. I didn't cry. I think I was too numb for that. Instead, I started cleaning the house, something to keep my hands busy. Eleanor's old photos were still on the shelf, dusted and framed. She would have known what to say. "Robert," she'd whisper, "you always forgive too easily." She was right. I had spent years forgiving Daniel, for missing birthdays, for not visiting on Christmas, for forgetting to call on the anniversary of his mother's passing. I always said he's busy. He has a family. But this time, it wasn't about being busy. It was about not caring. That night, around 10 p.m., I heard a faint vibration. My phone lit up. A message from Daniel. "Hey Dad, sorry about the confusion. It was a last-minute thing. The resort didn't have an extra room. We'll do another trip soon, promise." I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. "You mean the trip I paid for?" The message turned blue, red, but no reply. I laughed then. Not a normal laugh. Something hollow, something bitter. I put the phone down and walked outside into the cold night. The stars were bright, indifferent. I sat on the porch steps, thinking how funny it was that money could buy tickets, rooms, meals, and comfort, but not decency. The next day, I called the resort myself. The woman at the reception was polite. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I assist you?" "I'd like to check a reservation," I said, voice steady. "Under Daniel Miller. Paid with a Robert Miller card." She hesitated. "Yes, sir, I see it here. For guests, Daniel, Clara, and 2 children. They checked in 3 days ago. Is there a problem?" My throat tightened. "No problem," I said softly. "Just making sure they arrived safely." She paused again. "Would you like to leave a message for them, sir?" I thought about it. The easy choice would be to tell her yes, to send some polite fatherly note. Tell them I miss them. But something inside me was different now. "No," I said. "No message." When I hung up, I felt oddly calm, like a storm had passed and left a strange kind of stillness behind. That was the moment I decided, if my son could lie to me, use me, and erase me like that, then I'd return the favor. Not with shouting, not with anger, but with silence. Real silence. The kind that makes people realize too late what they've lost. So, when they came back from their trip, I'd be ready. Not to yell, not to argue, but to show them what it feels like when the person you take for granted finally stops waiting. And maybe then, Daniel would understand what family really means. Or maybe, he'd learn the hard way. They came back a week later, tanned, cheerful, and full of stories I was never supposed to hear. I knew the day they'd return because Daniel's car hadn't moved from the driveway in days, and I'd heard through the neighbors that the Millers were finally back from paradise. I stood at my kitchen window that morning, watching the sun glint off their SUV as it pulled into the driveway. For a brief second, I thought maybe he'd come straight to me. Maybe guilt would kick in, and he'd knock on my door, say, "Dad, we're sorry. We messed up." But no, the car doors opened, and laughter spilled out. Clara was the first to step out, holding shopping bags, her sunglasses perched high like a queen returning from conquest. The kids ran inside, dragging their tiny suitcases behind them. Daniel followed, stretching his arms and letting out a long, satisfied sigh. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. No one came. I made myself some tea, each clink of the spoon sounding louder than it should have. Finally, around noon, my phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Hey Dad, we're back. Trip was great. Let's catch up soon, yeah?" I stared at that message for a long time. Catch up soon. The same empty phrase he'd used 100 times before. So I replied, "Glad you had a good time." Nothing more. No question. No emotion. Just that. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, smiling awkwardly, holding a souvenir mug with palm trees on it. "Thought you'd like this," he said. "From the resort gift shop." I took the mug. "Thank you," I said flatly. He hesitated. "Listen, about the trip." I cut him off gently. "It's fine, Daniel." He blinked. "No, it was really last minute. Clara's parents." I said it's fine. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly thrown off by my calmness. "Well, we'll do something else soon. Maybe a road trip? Just the two of us, yeah?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe." He left a few minutes later, looking relieved, probably thinking the matter was settled. But as the door closed behind him, I felt the faintest smirk form on my face. Because something had changed, and he could sense it too. That evening, I sat by my desk and opened the folder with all the trip receipts. Thousands of dollars, flights, resort, meals, excursions. Every cent paid by me. I didn't regret the money. I regretted who I trusted. I opened my computer, logged into my bank account, and started going through old transactions. Daniel had borrowed money more times than I'd cared to remember. College tuition, car repairs, house down payment. I'd covered it all, quietly, thinking it was love, not charity. But love shouldn't feel like a balance sheet. That's when an idea came to me. A quiet, patient one. I pulled out a small notebook from the drawer, one Eleanor had given me long ago. On the first page, I wrote in slow, deliberate letters. Everything Daniel owes me, not in money, but in respect. Below that, I listed each moment. Each time he forgot a birthday. Each promise broken. Each manipulation hidden behind a smile. I didn't write to remind myself of anger. I wrote to stay focused. To stay cold. Over the next few days, I ignored his texts. Simple ones at first. "Hey, Dad. How's it going?" Then, "We should grab lunch." Eventually, they stopped. The silence worked. Clara, however, didn't stay quiet for long. One afternoon, as I was watering my front garden, she came walking up the path, fake warmth dripping from her voice. "Robert, you've been so quiet lately. Everything okay?" I looked at her, the sunlight catching the gold on her wrist, the same gold I'd paid for last Christmas. "I'm fine," I said, "just learning how to enjoy my own company." She tilted her head. "You know, Daniel feels awful about the vacation thing." "I'm sure he does," I replied. "But he seemed happy enough on the beach." That made her freeze for a second. "You saw the photos?" I did. She shifted her weight, forcing a nervous laugh. "Social media exaggerates things. You know how it is." "I do," I said softly. "It shows people for who they really are." Her smile faltered. She mumbled something about dinner plans and walked away quickly. That evening, for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since Eleanor was alive. Control. Not power, not revenge, just control. I didn't need to shout, accuse, or beg for decency anymore. I just needed to wait. Because time has a funny way of showing people what they've lost when silence replaces love. And soon enough, Daniel would come to me, not out of love, but out of need. And when he did, I'd be ready. 3 weeks passed. Not a word from Daniel. Not even a call for small talk. I kept my days quiet. Morning walks, coffee on the porch, trimming the rose bushes Eleanor once planted. Life moved in slow motion, and for once, I didn't mind. Then, one morning, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice overly casual. "How have you been?" "Fine," I said. He chuckled awkwardly. Good, good. Listen, I was wondering if you had a minute to talk. In person." Something in his tone told me this wasn't about catching up. "Sure," I said. "Come by." When he arrived that afternoon, he wasn't the confident man who had stood at my door weeks ago with a souvenir mug. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes sunken. He looked like someone who'd been carrying a secret too long. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same one where, years ago, we'd shared Sunday breakfasts and Eleanor's pancakes. "So," I said, pouring him coffee, "what's on your mind?" He took a long breath. "Dad, I wouldn't ask this if it weren't serious, but things have been rough. The company's been slow lately. I had to let some people go. Clara's freaking out about the bills. The credit cards are maxed out. The kids' tuition." I held up a hand. "Daniel, slow down." He looked desperate. "I just need a small loan to get through the next few months. You've always been there for me. I promise I'll pay you back this time." I almost laughed at this time. It sounded rehearsed, a line he'd said before, and I believed every time. "How much?" I asked. He hesitated. 20,000. Just until the new contracts come through. 20,000. The same amount I'd spent on that family vacation. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed calm. That's a lot of money. I know, he said quickly. And I wouldn't ask if I had another option. You're my father. Family sticks together, right? That last line almost made me smile. Family. The word he'd buried under lies and greed. I leaned back in my chair. You're right, Daniel. Family does stick together. When it's a family. He blinked, confused. What's that supposed to mean? I met his eyes. You forgot me on that trip. Remember? The one I paid for? His face went pale. Dad, that was a misunderstanding. No, son, I interrupted softly. That was a choice. He looked down at his hands, guilt flickering for just a moment. I know I messed up. I should have handled that better. But come on, Dad, don't hold on to that. We're family. I studied him quietly. Every wrinkle on his forehead told a story of pride, of carelessness, of a man who'd never faced consequences. I'll think about it, I said finally. He nodded, relieved. Thank you. Really, Dad. You don't know what this means. After he left, I sat there for a long time, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. I knew what I'd do. I wouldn't give him a dime, at least, not the way he expected. That night, I opened my old briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers, property deeds, bank statements, insurance documents. Daniel didn't know it, but I'd already made some quiet changes after the vacation. My savings were no longer in his reach. The house, too, had been legally transferred into a trust, one he couldn't touch. But I was going to help him in my own way, the kind that teaches, the kind that hurts just enough to make a man look in the mirror. The next morning, I called Daniel. Come by tomorrow, I said. I've made a decision. He sounded relieved. Thank you, Dad. You won't regret it. I hung up and looked at the framed photo of Eleanor on the mantel. Her eyes seemed to follow me, warm but knowing. You'd approve of this, I whispered. It's time he learned what it means to lose something real. That night, I slept peacefully, for the first time since that beach photo. Because tomorrow, my son was going to realize that the father he'd once used wasn't a fool anymore. And the lesson I'd give him would last far longer than any check ever could. Daniel arrived early the next morning, earlier than I'd expected. He must have been desperate. When I opened the door, he was already standing there, dressed in a suit too sharp for the occasion, probably an attempt to look respectable, dependable, like the man he wanted me to believe he still was. Morning, Dad, he said, his tone light but his eyes anxious. Come in, I replied. He followed me into the kitchen, where 2 mugs of coffee were already waiting. I sat down first. He hesitated, then joined me, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. So, he began, did you think about it? I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch until it made him shift in his seat. Then I said, I did. He leaned forward, eager. And, I'm going to help you, Daniel, I said softly. But not with money. His smile froze. What do you mean? I'm giving you something more valuable than that, I said, sliding a small envelope across the table. He frowned, confused, and opened it. Inside was a single photo, the one I'd printed from Facebook, showing him, Clara, and the kids laughing on that beach. Beneath it, I'd written in pen, You paid nothing for this, but it cost me everything. He stared at it in silence. His jaw tightened. Dad, what is this supposed to mean? It means, I said, leaning forward, that I finally understand what kind of man you've become, and I'm not going to keep enabling that. He scoffed, shaking his head. So this is about the trip again? Dad, it was a mix-up. We didn't have enough rooms. Clara. Stop, I interrupted quietly. Don't insult me with more lies. He opened his mouth to speak again, but my voice cut through his excuses, calm and cold. You used me, Daniel. You made me believe that I still mattered, that I still had a place in this family. And I believed you, because that's what fathers do. But when you left me behind, you didn't just take a vacation. You took away the last piece of trust one had in you. For the first time, I saw something break in him. Not anger, not guilt, but shame. Real, human shame. His eyes darted down, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the photo. Dad, he said quietly, I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I said. You meant to forget me. You meant to take advantage. And now you've come back because you need something again. That's the only time you remember I exist. He swallowed hard. That's not true, isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you came over just to talk? To help with something? To sit down and share a meal without needing anything from me? He didn't answer. His silence said everything. I stood up and walked to the cabinet. From the top shelf, I took out a small, worn folder, the trust papers I'd prepared weeks ago. I placed them on the table. This house, my savings, everything your mother and I built, it's all going into a trust. When I'm gone, it won't go to you. His head shot up. What? I met his gaze steadily. It'll go to your children. Directly. They're innocent in this. But you've had enough chances. He pushed his chair back, his voice rising. Dad, you can't do that. That's not fair. Fair. I repeated. You think leaving me behind after I paid for your vacation was fair? You think using me for years was fair? His face turned red. You're overreacting. No, I said quietly, sitting back down. I'm finally reacting. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he slammed his hands on the table. You're making a mistake, he hissed. I'm your son. I nodded slowly. And you were my pride. Until you chose convenience over conscience. The silence that followed was heavy. He looked around the kitchen, the same one he grew up in, the same one that once smelled of pancakes and Sunday mornings. I could see the memories flicker across his face, replaced by something colder. He stood up abruptly, shoving the chair back. Fine, he said. Keep your money. I don't need it. I smiled faintly. You already have. He froze for a second, realizing the truth in that sentence, then turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him, rattling the picture frames on the wall. When the silence returned, I felt lighter. Sad, yes, but lighter. I walked to the window and watched him drive off, the car speeding down the road like a man running from himself. For years, I'd given him everything he asked for: love, forgiveness, money. And he'd taken it all without gratitude. But not this time. This time, I'd taken something back, my dignity. And though he didn't know it yet, that lesson would echo long after the sound of his engine faded. Because sooner or later, life has a way of teaching you that every debt must be repaid, one way or another. For several days after that confrontation, the house was silent again, but this time, it wasn't an empty silence. It was peaceful. I watered the garden, fixed the old fence, and started repainting Eleanor's reading room. There was something deeply satisfying in simple work, in the kind of quiet that didn't depend on anyone's approval. Daniel didn't call. Not once. I assumed he was angry, maybe embarrassed, maybe both. But it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, I didn't care what he thought. The air in my home felt cleaner without the weight of his voice. Then, one evening, as I was closing the curtains, I saw headlights pull into my driveway. It was Daniel's car. He didn't come alone this time. Clara was with him. I could tell from the way she stepped out, arms crossed, expression sharp, that this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. I opened the door before they could knock. Evening, I said. Clara was the first to speak. Robert, we need to talk. About what? She gave a short, humorless laugh. About this ridiculous stunt of yours. You can't just decide to take everything away. That's not how family works. Daniel stood behind her, looking tired. Clara, please. No, Daniel, she snapped. He needs to understand what he's doing. Then she turned back to me, eyes cold. We have children, Robert. Do you want them to grow up thinking their grandfather abandoned them? I kept my tone calm. I haven't abandoned anyone. I've just stopped being a fool. Her face tightened. You think this is fair? After everything we've done for you? I smiled faintly. You mean after everything I've done for you? Daniel finally stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. Dad, please. Let's not fight. I just need some time to get back on my feet. Once I do, I'll pay you back for everything, I swear. You don't owe me money, I said softly. You owe me respect. And that's a debt I can't collect for you. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Clara muttered something under her breath and walked off toward the car. I told you this was useless, she hissed. Daniel lingered by the doorway, his shoulders slumped. Dad, I really am sorry. I studied him. His eyes were tired, older somehow. There was sincerity there this time, but not the kind that changes people. Just the kind that makes them temporarily regret being caught. Sorry doesn't erase what's done, I said. It just shows you understand it now. He nodded slowly. I guess I deserve that. Yes, I said, but it doesn't mean I stopped caring. I just stopped protecting you from your own choices. He looked at me one last time, then turned and walked away. The sound of the car engine faded into the night, and with it, the last trace of the man I once thought my son would be. Over the next few weeks, the gossip started trickling in. Small-town whispers travel faster than wind. Daniel's business had begun falling apart. Investors pulled out, clients disappeared. Clara's real estate side projects, built with my loans, were now in debt. They'd overextended themselves, believing I'd always be there to bail them out. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just watched quietly. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the same cafe where Daniel and I used to have lunch when he was in college. The waitress, an older woman who'd known me for years, asked, "Haven't seen your boy in a while, Robert." I smiled gently. "He's learning some things," I said. "Hard lessons?" she asked. "The kind that last," I replied. When I returned home, the answering machine light was blinking. I pressed play. Daniel's voice, shaky, filled the room. "Dad, I'm sorry. I mean it this time. We lost the house. Clara's staying with her parents for a while. I didn't know who else to call." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "You were right. About everything. I thought I could do it all without you. I thought money made me better than you. But now, I just wish I could start over." There was a long silence before the message ended. I stood there for a while, staring at the phone. My first instinct was to call him back. The father in me still wanted to fix things. But then I looked at the photo of Eleanor again. She'd always said, "Let him fall once, Robert. Let him learn that you can't build a man's strength by cushioning every fall." So I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I wrote a short note and mailed it to him the next morning. "Daniel, I still love you. But love doesn't mean rescue. When you're ready to rebuild, really rebuild, my door will be open. Not for money. For honesty." A week passed. No reply. But somehow, I knew he'd read it. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the victim anymore. I felt like a father again, not because I gave, but because I finally taught. It was almost 2 months before I saw Daniel again. Summer had begun to fade, the leaves along Maple Street just starting to turn gold. I was sweeping the porch one morning when I saw a familiar figure walking slowly up the road. No car, no polished shoes, no expensive jacket. Just Daniel, wearing a wrinkled shirt, his head lowered like a man carrying years of regret. He stopped at the gate, hesitating. I didn't move. I wanted to see what he'd do, if he'd turn away like before or finally step through. After a long pause, he pushed the latch and came in. "Hi, Dad," he said quietly. His voice was small, almost childlike, the same tone he used when he was 10 and had broken my tools in the garage. "Daniel," I said, setting the broom aside. "You look tired." He gave a weak smile. "I am. I've been working odd jobs, trying to keep things together." I nodded slowly. "And Clara?" "She left," he said. "Took the kids to her parents' place. Said she couldn't do it anymore." There was no bitterness in his tone, just exhaustion. He shifted awkwardly. "I didn't come here for money, Dad. I know I've lost that right. He swallowed hard. "I just didn't know where else to go." I studied his face. The arrogance that used to coat every word was gone. In its place was a quiet kind of pain, the kind that strips a man down to his truth. "Come inside," I said. He followed me into the kitchen. The sunlight through the curtains made everything glow. The same kitchen where we'd once argued, where he'd stood demanding, defending, pretending to be right. But now he looked small in that chair. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began slowly. "About respect. About family. I never really understood what those words meant until I lost them." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I used to think you were weak," he said. "Always forgiving. Always giving. I thought I was smarter because I took what I wanted. But I see now, you weren't weak. You were just good, and I used that against you." His voice cracked, and I hate myself for it. For the first time in years, my eyes stung. I turned slightly, pretending to adjust my cup. "You're not the only one who made mistakes," I said. "I kept giving you everything because I wanted to feel needed. Maybe I was trying to hold on to your mother through you. But that wasn't love either, it was fear." He looked up, confused. "Fear. Fear of being alone," I said. "Fear of losing what little family I had left. I thought if I just gave enough, you'd come back. But real family doesn't need to be bought." We sat in silence for a long while. Then Daniel whispered, "I wish Mom were here. She'd know what to say." I smiled faintly. "She'd probably tell us both to stop being stubborn fools." He laughed, a soft, broken laugh, but real. It was the first time I'd heard that sound from him in years. Then he said, "Dad, I don't expect you to trust me again, but I want to try. Maybe start over. Not as a son asking for help, but as a man trying to earn it." I leaned back, studying him carefully. His eyes met mine, steady, humbled, honest. For once, he wasn't performing. He was present. "All right," I said finally. "But you'll start small." He nodded eagerly. "Anything. I've been fixing the old fence out back," I said. "The boards are heavy. I could use another pair of hands." Daniel looked at me, surprised, and then smiled, genuinely this time. "I'd like that." We spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side, like we hadn't in years. No fancy words, no promises, just the sound of hammers and the creak of old wood giving way to new. The rhythm of rebuilding, piece by piece. When we finished, the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "It feels good to build something with you again." "It does," I said quietly. As we stood there, watching the light fade, I realized something. I hadn't lost my son after all. I'd simply needed to stop saving him long enough for him to find his way back. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go until the one you love remembers why they need to return. And that evening, as Daniel packed his tools, he turned to me and said, "See you tomorrow, Dad?" I nodded. "I'll be here." He smiled, and for the first time in years, it wasn't forced. It was real, and that was enough. The next morning, Daniel came back. No calls, no texts, he just showed up. He was wearing the same old work shirt, sleeves rolled up, with a quiet determination in his eyes. I didn't expect him to actually come, but there he was, holding a thermos of coffee and a small paper bag. "I brought breakfast," he said with a shy smile. "From the diner?" I asked. He nodded. "Your favorite, scrambled eggs with extra pepper. And black coffee, no sugar." I couldn't help but smile. He remembered. That simple gesture did something to me. It broke through a wall I didn't realize was still standing. We ate in silence on the porch, the morning air cool and still. After a while, Daniel said, "I called the kids last night. Told them I messed up. That I hurt you. They didn't understand much, but I needed them to know." That caught me off guard. I turned to look at him. "That must have been hard." He nodded slowly. "It was. But it felt right. I don't want them growing up thinking it's okay to use people who love you." I watched him carefully. There was no pride in his voice, no excuses. Just sincerity. When we finished breakfast, he stood up and picked up a hammer. "Where do we start today?" We spent hours fixing the fence, replacing old boards, sanding rough edges, painting under the late summer sun. He didn't complain once. Not when the wood splintered, not when sweat soaked through his shirt. At one point, he asked quietly, "Do you remember when we built the treehouse in the backyard? I was 8, and you let me hold the nails while you climbed." I chuckled. "I remember you dropped half of them." He grinned faintly. "Yeah, you said, 'It's okay, son. Dropping a nail isn't failure. Giving up before you finish is.'" I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I didn't reply. I just kept painting. But inside, something softened. Later that day, he stood back to admire our work. "Looks good," he said. "Stronger than before." "Just like people," I murmured. He looked at me, and there was something different in his eyes. Not the old arrogance, but quiet gratitude. "I've been job hunting," he said. "Small stuff. Construction work, mostly. I'm trying to pay off some of the debts. I don't expect you to believe in me yet, but I want you to see that I'm not giving up." I nodded. "That's good." He hesitated, then added, "I also want to pay you back. For everything I owe." I laughed softly. "Daniel, I don't need your money." "I know," he said, "but I need to do it. Not for you, for me." There it was. The shift. He wasn't the same man who once treated my kindness like a bank account. He was trying, not to please me, but to fix himself. Over the next few weeks, he kept coming. Sometimes we worked on small things, cleaning the garage, fixing the gutters, repainting the porch railing. Other times we just sat and talked. About life. About Eleanor. About mistakes. Each visit felt less like an apology and more like a rebuilding. Not of things, but of trust. One evening, after we'd finished repairing the shed roof, he turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think being a man meant never needing help. Now I think it means owning the hurt you caused and still showing up." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I put my hand on his shoulder. "Your mother would have been proud to hear that." He smiled. eyes glistening. You think so? I know so. That night, after he left, I sat alone on the porch watching the sun go down. The yard was quiet, the air cool and sweet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a father mourning what he'd lost. I felt like a man who'd finally found peace in what he still had, and who his son might still become. Sometimes, redemption doesn't come with grand gestures. It comes with small, steady acts, a repaired fence, a shared breakfast, a simple promise kept. And as I watched the last light fade, I realized the most beautiful kind of revenge wasn't making him suffer. It was watching him change. Autumn had settled in by then. The air turned crisp, the smell of burning leaves drifted through the neighborhood, and the days grew shorter. Daniel still came by every few days, not out of obligation anymore, but out of habit. The quiet between us had changed too. It wasn't uncomfortable silence now, it was peace. One Friday evening, he showed up later than usual, his hands in his jacket pockets, a strange nervous energy about him. Busy day? I asked, closing the shed door. You could say that, he replied, trying to hide a small smile. Actually, I was hoping you could come somewhere with me tomorrow, just for the afternoon. I raised an eyebrow. Where to? He hesitated. It's a surprise. Nothing big. Just something I've been working on. I didn't press further. I'd learned that sometimes the best answers come when you stop demanding them. So I just nodded. All right, pick me up at noon. The next day, he arrived exactly on time. Another small but meaningful change. We drove out of town, past the fields turning gold under the October sun. After about half an hour, he turned down a narrow dirt road I didn't recognize. When the trees cleared, I saw it. A small wooden bench under a maple tree by a quiet pond. Freshly painted, with a small plaque fixed to the backrest. The inscription caught the sunlight as I stepped closer. In loving memory of Eleanor Miller, whose kindness built everything that mattered. My breath caught in my throat. I ran my hand over the polished wood, feeling the smooth letters under my fingers. You did this? I asked quietly. Daniel nodded, his eyes on the pond. Yeah, I remembered how much she loved this place. You used to bring her here for picnics, right? I swallowed hard. Every Sunday. I found the old spot, he continued. The bench was gone, so I built a new one. Thought it should stand again. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Then, finally, I said, she would have loved it. I hope so, he whispered. I wanted to do something that wasn't about me for once. Something that was just right. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man standing before me wasn't the same Daniel who had left me behind months ago. This one carried his mistakes, but also his humility. He wasn't running anymore. We sat down on the bench together, watching the water ripple gently. I could almost hear Eleanor's laughter on the wind, faint but warm. Daniel broke the silence after a while. Dad, I know I can't undo what I did, but if you'll let me, I want to keep showing up. Not just here, in your life. For good this time. I smiled faintly. You already are. He turned to me, his eyes wet. Thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved it most. I took a deep breath, the kind that fills the chest with both pain and peace. You're my son, I said. That means I'll always believe you can do better, even when you don't. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Then I guess I'll keep trying to prove you right. We sat there until the sun dipped below the trees, the light turning the pond into molten gold. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was healing. As we got up to leave, I ran my fingers over the plaque again. It wasn't just a tribute to Eleanor. It was a reminder that love doesn't disappear when people fail. It waits. It forgives. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it rebuilds what you thought was lost forever. That night, when Daniel dropped me off, he said, "See you next week, Dad. Maybe we can plant some flowers by the bench." I nodded, smiling. We will. When he drove away, I looked up at the stars, brighter than usual, and whispered, "You see, Eleanor? He's finding his way." And for the first time in a long time, I felt her there, not in memory, but in peace. The year turned, and winter came quietly, blanketing our small town in snow. The holidays had always been Eleanor's favorite time. She loved the twinkle of lights, the smell of cinnamon, and how the world seemed softer under the cold. Since she'd passed, Christmas had mostly been a hollow tradition for me. A day to endure, not celebrate. But that year was different. It started with a phone call from Daniel. Dad, he said, his tone hesitant but warm. The kids want to see you this Christmas. We'd like you to come over. Just for dinner. Nothing fancy. For a moment, I couldn't answer. It had been years since I'd spent Christmas with family, real family. The thought scared me more than I wanted to admit. You sure that's what everyone wants? I asked quietly. Daniel chuckled softly. They insisted. I think we all need it. So I said yes. When Christmas Eve arrived, I stood at my door holding a simple box, a few gifts for the grandkids, nothing extravagant. The street glowed with golden lights, and through the snow, Daniel's house looked warm and alive. For a second, I almost turned back, afraid to step into something that once hurt so much. But then I saw two small figures through the window, my grandchildren, waving excitedly as if they'd been waiting just for me. The door opened before I reached it. Daniel stood there, smiling nervously. Merry Christmas, Dad. I smiled back. Merry Christmas, son. Inside, the air smelled like roast turkey and pine. The kids ran up to hug me, chattering about their presents. It was chaotic, loud, beautiful, the kind of noise I hadn't realized I missed. Clara was there too. She looked uneasy at first, but managed a polite smile. Robert, she said softly. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, I replied. Dinner was simple, but every moment felt like a quiet miracle. Daniel carved the turkey, the kids passed plates, and laughter filled the spaces that once held resentment. For the first time, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like healing. At one point, Daniel raised his glass. Before we eat, he said, clearing his throat, I just want to say something. The room went still. He looked at me. Dad, this year you taught me more than any year of my life. You taught me what strength really is. Not shouting, not money, not pride. Just showing up, even when it hurts. He paused, his voice trembling. I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness, but I hope, someday, I'll earn it. I looked around the table, at him, at the kids, even at Clara, and felt something in my chest loosen. You already have, I said quietly. The kids cheered at the toast, not really understanding, but happy anyway. We clinked glasses, and for a brief second, I swore I saw Eleanor's reflection in the window, smiling that small, knowing smile of hers. After dinner, Daniel handed me a small wrapped box. It's nothing fancy, he said. Just something I thought you'd like. Inside was a framed photograph, the new bench by the pond, with fresh flowers planted underneath and a note written in Daniel's handwriting taped to the corner. For Mom, from both of us. I swallowed hard. My voice nearly broke when I said, It's perfect. Later that night, when the kids had gone to bed and the lights dimmed, Daniel and I stood outside together, watching the snow fall in silence. You know, he said quietly, I used to think you were the one who needed saving. Turns out, it was me all along. I put a hand on his shoulder. We both needed saving, son. We just found it in different ways. He nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. Thank you for not giving up. I smiled faintly. That's what fathers do. We wait. And when our children finally find their way home, we make sure the door's still open. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time since he was a boy, he hugged me like he meant it. No guilt, no pity, just love. And as the snow fell softly around us, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't brought me peace. Forgiveness had. But forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was victory. The quiet kind. The kind that lasts. That night, as I walked home under the falling snow, I whispered into the cold. We did it, Eleanor. He's home. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel alone. Spring came quietly that year. The kind of spring that doesn't announce itself with color and noise, but with the soft sound of melting snow and the scent of wet earth. The world felt gentler, slower. Maybe it was just me. It had been nearly a year since that Christmas dinner, the first one in so many years that had actually felt like family. Since then, Daniel visited often. Sometimes he brought the kids, sometimes he came alone, helping me fix little things around the house, or just sitting quietly with a cup of coffee. We didn't talk about the past anymore. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy now. It was healing. One morning, while cleaning the small desk in my late wife's room, the one I hadn't opened since before she passed, I found it. A yellowed envelope, tucked under a stack of old bills and postcards. My heart skipped a beat when I saw her handwriting. Eleanor Miller, graceful, careful letters. And beneath it, in her soft cursive, for Robert, when you feel lost. I stood there for a long time before I opened it. The air in the room was still, dust dancing in the sunlight like ghosts of forgotten years. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper inside. My love, if you're reading this, it means time has tested you again. You've always been strong, Robert, stronger than you think. But sometimes your strength turns into sacrifice, and you forget to keep a little bit of it for yourself. You've always believed the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. I hope you never lose that. But please, promise me one thing. Don't let their mistakes turn you cold. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Because holding on to hurt only keeps you living in the moment it was born. Let it go, my love. You have so much left to give, and I'll be with you, even when you can't see me. Love always. Eleanor. By the time I reached her name, the words blurred through the tears clouding my vision. My knees felt weak, and I sank into her old chair. The room smelled faintly of lavender, just like she used to, and for a second, I swore I could feel her hand resting gently on my shoulder. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. When I finally stood, I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I needed air, and I knew exactly where I was going. The path to the pond was muddy from the thaw. Birds had returned, singing from bare branches that were just beginning to show hints of green. When I reached the bench Daniel had built, Eleanor's bench, I stopped. It looked the same as the day we'd unveiled it together, but the flowers beneath it had wilted from the cold. I knelt and brushed the dead leaves away, clearing the space around the plaque. The inscription caught the afternoon light. In loving memory of Eleanor Miller, whose kindness built everything that mattered. I traced the letters with my fingers, then sat down slowly. The bench creaked softly under my weight. For a moment, I just breathed, the way you do when words feel too small for what's in your heart. The pond shimmered in the sunlight, ripples spreading across the surface like time itself. I pulled the letter from my pocket, smoothing it out carefully. Then I took out the old notebook, the one I'd started long ago, the one that once held a list of everything Daniel owed me. I flipped past the pages of bitterness and pain, past the handwriting that belonged to a man I no longer was. On the last blank page, I wrote, Eleanor, I found your letter today. You were right. I did lose myself for a while. I thought strength meant holding everything together, even when it was breaking me apart. But now I see what you meant. Forgiving Daniel didn't fix the past. It fixed me. It gave me peace I didn't know I was missing. He visits often now. He's learning, growing, trying to be the man you always hoped he'd become. Sometimes I see flashes of you in him, in his patience, in the way he talks to the children. You'd be proud, Eleanor. I know you would. As for me, I'm finally okay. I still miss you every day, but it's not the kind of missing that hurts anymore. It's the kind that reminds me how lucky I was to love you at all. Thank you for believing I could forgive, not for his sake, but for mine. You always knew me better than I knew myself. Yours always, Robert. When I finished writing, I placed both letters, hers and mine, under the bench, secured beneath a smooth flat stone I'd picked up from the water's edge. A quiet offering. As I stood, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of spring, fresh earth, wet leaves, and the faint sweetness of the blossoms just beginning to bloom. I looked out across the pond, the water reflecting the sky in soft shades of blue and gold. And then, something small but unmistakable happened. A single white feather drifted down from the sky, caught in a lazy spiral before landing on the bench beside the stone. I smiled through my tears. I know, I whispered. You're still here. That night, back home, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear one by one. The house was quiet, but not empty. The loneliness I used to dread was gone, replaced by something gentler, something like peace. Daniel called later that evening. Hey, Dad, he said. Just wanted to tell you. I got the new job. Construction foreman. It's not fancy, but it's honest work. I smiled. That sounds perfect, son. He paused for a moment, then said softly, I'm taking the kids to the pond tomorrow. Thought we'd plant new flowers by Mom's bench. Would you come? Of course, I said. I'll bring the seeds. When I hung up, I leaned back in my chair, staring at Eleanor's old photo on the wall, her smile still as alive as ever. Looks like we did it, I whispered. He's finally growing into the man you believed he could be. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the trees. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang, marking the hour. And in that stillness, I felt it, the quiet truth I'd been searching for all along. Sometimes revenge isn't about making others hurt. Sometimes it's about finding peace where they left you broken. And forgiveness, true forgiveness, isn't letting them off the hook. It's setting yourself free. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the tea fading between my hands, and smiled. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a man who'd lost everything. I felt like a man who'd finally understood what it meant to have enough.